I never thought I'd catch her, not in a million years. I remember saying that to myself that night, alone in the dim glow of our kitchen light, my hand shaking as it hovered over the stack of unopened mail. The smell of grilled burgers from the backyard cookout still lingered faintly in the air, mingling with the faint aroma of her Chanel perfume, the one she'd worn when we first met at that downtown Dallas art gallery years ago. But this wasn't nostalgia, it was dread. Something had shifted, subtle at first, like the way a football crowd holds its breath before the kickoff. I'm Mark, 36, works in corporate finance in Plano. I met Lisa in Austin at a rainy indie music festival that neither of us wanted to admit we'd actually enjoyed. She was wearing ripped jeans and a leather jacket, her hair curling stubbornly in the humidity, eyes wide with some kind of mischief that made me feel both terrified and alive. I remember buying her a corn dog because she had refused the overpriced festival hot dogs, and that tiny gesture somehow sparked months of late-night talks, weekend road trips up the hill country, and eventually a small wedding on a crisp October Saturday. Our lives felt like a montage of perfect Americana, football Sundays at the local diner, road trips to Lake Travis, a barbecue in the backyard every 4th of July with the neighbors from 3 streets over. Those memories now seemed like a cruel joke, because lately Lisa had been different, the way she'd linger by the fridge as if deciding whether to grab a water or not, the sudden late nights working overtime at a Starbucks downtown, and the way her phone would flip face down on the counter whenever I walked into the kitchen. I tried to rationalize it, maybe stress, maybe work deadlines, maybe she just needed space. But deep down, I felt the gnawing suspicion that something more sinister was at play, and my gut, as much as I hated to admit it, had never steered me wrong before. We used to have this Saturday ritual: pancakes at sunrise, maple syrup dribbling down our fingers, ESPN flickering on the little TV in the kitchen, while our golden retriever, Rusty, pawed at our legs for scraps. Those mornings felt sacred, but last Saturday she didn't even glance up when I poured the coffee. Just nodded absently, eyes glued to her phone, thumbs moving so fast I couldn't read them even if I tried. I watched her for a full 30 seconds, longer than I'd ever observed her before, and felt a chill I couldn't shake. Something was happening, something I wasn't meant to know yet, but I had to. I began noticing the cracks in small, almost invisible ways. Receipts from hotels that didn't ring any bells, gas statements at stations along streets I'd never driven, messages that blinked briefly before she would pull the phone away when I entered the room. And then there was that one night, an evening I will never forget, when she left our house in Dallas, supposedly for a girls' night out at the Elm Street wine bar downtown. But when I drove past to check on her, I know, not my proudest move, I saw her car parked across the street from a condo complex I'd never been to, with a man's truck right beside hers. I didn't recognize the make at first, but the color, the same navy blue as my neighbor's husband, made my heart sink into my stomach like a lead weight. Lisa had a way of laughing that made you forget everything else. Her laugh was the soundtrack to my life for years, but lately that laugh had changed too. It was sharper, forced, like the sound of ice cracking in a glass before it spills over. I remembered thinking one night, staring at the ceiling, that even the way she breathed when asleep was different. Something tense, something hidden, as if every exhale was measured, rehearsed. And I couldn't shake the feeling that she was practicing for me, or maybe practicing to lie to me. I tried to distract myself. I went on long runs along White Rock Lake, took Rusty to the dog park in East Dallas, even caught a few games at the Cotton Bowl with my old college friends. But the gnawing suspicion followed me like a shadow that refused to dissolve. Every laugh at the diner, every "sweetie" whispered when I wasn't paying attention, seemed layered with a meaning I couldn't decode. Something was wrong, and I felt like a man trapped in a movie, watching the protagonist slowly uncover the betrayal that everyone else sees except him. Then came the phone. It wasn't hers. It was hers, but not hers. I had noticed a small sync error on the iMessage app on my laptop one evening. A tiny pop-up, a message preview she hadn't cleared fast enough. One sentence. One sentence that froze me in place the same way a pitcher freezes just before a fastball hits. It said, "I don't care if he suspects, I'll make this work." No signature, no context, but I knew. My pulse kicked in like a drum line, and every memory of our perfect life suddenly felt like a well-rehearsed lie. And that's when I decided I couldn't wait anymore. I needed to know the truth before it destroyed me completely. I started small. Subtle surveillance, checking receipts, notes, even the GPS on her car when she thought I was asleep. I wasn't proud of it. I felt like a detective in a cheap crime drama, but I justified it. Knowing the truth now would save me years of deception and heartbreak. And there was one more detail, one I hadn't expected. While digging through her email for work-related documents, again, I know this sounds extreme, I stumbled on something that froze my blood colder than the AC in our Texas summer. A recurring name, always appearing in the subject lines of personal messages. Not a friend, not a coworker, a woman. And not just any woman, a woman whose husband, I realized with a sinking heart, Lisa had been casually mentioning at dinner parties. A friend we invited often. Someone whose existence we never questioned. I remember the day I pieced it together. I was standing in our garage, leaning against Rusty's crate, holding a stack of bills and messages, and it hit me all at once. Lisa wasn't just cheating. She was sleeping with someone whose life was intertwined with mine in ways I hadn't imagined. And the real kicker, the thing that made my blood boil and my brain scream in disbelief, was that his wife, the very woman I'd seen laughing at our backyard BBQs, probably had no idea yet. And I realized, with a sudden, almost manic clarity, that I had a choice: wallow in the betrayal or strike back in a way that she would never see coming. The next morning, Lisa sat at our breakfast nook, sipping her coffee with that same careless smile. Rusty nudged her hand for a treat, oblivious to the storm brewing just a few feet away. I smiled back, calm, almost serene, hiding the fury that had been simmering all night. I knew that whatever came next would change everything: our marriage, our friendships, and the illusion of the perfect American life we'd built. And deep down, a part of me, the part that had been quietly sharpening its patience and planning every step, felt alive. Because I wasn't going to confront her, not yet. Not until I had every piece of evidence. Not until I knew exactly how far this web of deceit stretched. And more importantly, not until I realized that I might not be alone in my fury, that the wife of the man Lisa was sleeping with might just become my unexpected ally in a revenge neither of us could fully predict. That night, I stayed up until 2 a.m., sipping a Bud Light I'd left in the fridge from the weekend cookout, scrolling through messages, piecing together schedules, cross-referencing locations, and imagining the look on Lisa's face when she realized that for once, she wasn't the one controlling the narrative. I stared at a crayon drawing my daughter had left on the counter, a house with stick figures, 2 dogs, and a son. And for a moment, I allowed myself to feel something besides anger. A memory of when our lives felt simple, innocent, and real. But then I shook it off. Innocence didn't pay bills. Innocence didn't expose lies. Innocence didn't protect me from betrayal. I put the drawing back in its folder, grabbed Rusty's leash, and went outside for a walk, letting the Texas night air cool my burning thoughts. Across the street, the neighbor's porch light flickered on, their laughter faint but unmistakable as someone spoke into a phone. I felt a cold clarity settle in. The pieces were aligning, and soon, very soon, the truth wouldn't just be known. It would be witnessed, undeniable and brutal in its revelation. And in that quiet, lonely moment under the stars, I whispered to myself, she thinks she's untouchable. She has no idea what's coming. Because something was coming. Something that would unravel everything Lisa thought she had hidden. And I realized, with a shiver, that the worst part wasn't the betrayal itself. It was the anticipation of the payback, the way it would play out like the most satisfying ending to a movie she never wanted to star in. I went back inside, locked the door, and glanced at the calendar on the fridge. Notes from past dinners, birthdays, errands, all suddenly seemed like evidence, like breadcrumbs leading me closer to the moment where the truth would erupt. And as I turned off the kitchen light, leaving Rusty curled at my feet, I knew one thing for certain. The life we had built, the life I thought I knew, was over. And from the ashes, I would plan something far more precise, far more satisfying than any confrontation she could imagine. And that's when my phone buzzed. A single message from an unknown number. I know what she's doing. Are you ready to make it right? I froze. The game had officially begun. The next morning, I woke up to the soft glow of dawn spilling through the blinds, the hum of our old ceiling fan cutting a steady rhythm over the quiet of the house. Rusty nudged my shoulder as if he knew the weight of the day ahead, and I rubbed my eyes, feeling the kind of exhaustion that comes from long nights spent thinking and plotting rather than sleeping. The unknown number's message from last night haunted me. I know what she's doing. Are you ready to make it right? My thumb hovered over the reply button for a long time, but I didn't respond. Not yet. I needed proof. I needed everything. Lisa emerged from the bedroom, yawning, hair mussed from sleep, in one of her old oversized hoodies. At first glance, she looked like the woman I had married, a little rough around the edges, but familiar. But I'd learned to read her now, to notice the way her eyes darted to her phone before locking onto mine, the tiny hesitation in her smile. There was a rhythm to her deception, a subtle choreography I was starting to understand. "Morning," she said, voice airy, casual. "Coffee?" I nodded, pouring mine black, leaving a dash of creamer untouched. She took her cup and moved to the counter, phone already in hand, scrolling. That was the first prop I noticed. The phone. Always the phone. I realized that if I wanted to know the truth, that little device would be my window into the chaos she was weaving. I spent the day in calculated observation. I didn't confront her, didn't accuse. I waited for patterns, for behavior that couldn't be explained away. And the patterns emerged faster than I anticipated. A lunch meeting downtown that ended with her taking a left turn into a street that didn't exist on her usual route. A gas station receipt crumpled in the backseat of her car, time-stamped an hour before she claimed to leave work. A credit card charge at a boutique hotel downtown when she swore she'd been at a cooking class. Each small inconsistency stacked like dominoes, and every time I caught one, my heart thudded with that same mix of dread and adrenaline. I started collecting them all, silent, meticulous, compulsive. I created folders on my laptop, snapping photos of receipts, credit card statements, and screenshots of her seemingly innocuous texts. The texts were innocuous only on the surface. I noticed a recurring emoji, the same combination that didn't make sense unless you knew the context. A wink, a smirk, the way she punctuated messages with little flourishes that, in private, spoke volumes. I cross-referenced dates with our shared calendar, and the picture began to form. Lisa wasn't just sneaking around. She was orchestrating a parallel life. One afternoon, I decided to check the security cameras I had installed months ago for our peace of mind. Lisa had never questioned them, not the ones inside the house, not the one facing the driveway. I rewound footage from the night of that so-called girls' night out. At first, nothing unusual, Lisa leaving, phone in hand, wallet snug in her hoodie pocket. But then the camera caught it. A dark sedan pulling up across the street from the condo complex I'd spotted her at before. She slipped into the passenger seat, his hand brushing hers in a way that left no room for interpretation. My stomach dropped. Rusty whined at my side, and I felt the first real pang of betrayal hit me like a punch to the gut. I printed out still frames from the video. One frame showed Lisa laughing, leaning into him in a way she'd never leaned into me in years. Another showed their hands intertwined over the center console. And yet another, the most damning, captured a small, nearly invisible necklace he wore, a silver chain I recognized from a dinner we had attended with his wife last month. My mind reeled. The wife. She had a wife, and I hadn't known it. And that's when the first flicker of an idea struck me. If there was someone else involved, someone I might actually be able to reach, someone who could become an ally. But before I could act, I needed more proof, something tangible, something she couldn't gaslight away. The next day, I took a risk. I left the house under the pretense of errands and circled back to the condo complex. I parked a block away, keeping the engine running, pretending to check my emails. Across the street, through a pair of binoculars I had stashed in the glove compartment, I saw them, Lisa and the man, walking into the building, whispering, heads close, hands brushing. The security gate beeped as they entered, and for a moment, the world felt still. When I returned home, I found a letter slipped under the front door, the kind you don't expect in a city apartment complex, but still happens. Typed, formal, unsigned. It read, "Stop looking. You don't want to know the damage. But if you insist, keep your eyes open. Evidence is everywhere." My pulse raced. Whoever had sent this knew I was on to them. Whoever it was, they weren't afraid. And I realized, with a mixture of dread and excitement, that I wasn't the only one watching. That night, I sat at the kitchen table, the letter beside the laptop, sipping a beer while Rusty gnawed on a bone. I spread out the receipts, hotel invoices, gas slips, and screenshots in front of me, stacking them like tiles in a puzzle. Each piece fit perfectly, each small discrepancy a glaring neon sign pointing to the same conclusion. Lisa was cheating. But it wasn't just a fling. It was a long-running, carefully maintained secret. And now, I had everything I needed to turn suspicion into irrefutable evidence. I decided to take it a step further. I set up a small folder in the cloud, password protected, containing all the digital proofs, texts, videos, invoices, GPS logs, then I printed out a copy for myself, arranging them chronologically, noting timestamps, locations, and small side notes about each encounter. I had become a curator of betrayal, cataloging every lie with precision. And somewhere deep down, I knew this wasn't just for me. It was a blueprint, a roadmap for what would come next. A week later, I received a text from the unknown number again. "Meet me tomorrow. Bring what you've collected. You'll want an ally for this." I hesitated, then typed back, "Where?" The response was simple. "The diner on Main, 7 p.m., alone." I drove past the diner that evening, the neon open sign flickering as dusk settled over the parking lot. A faint smell of coffee, fried eggs, and syrup wafted through the air. I parked, trying not to appear suspicious, and walked inside. The place was quiet, the clatter of dishes muted against the hum of the ceiling fans. At a corner booth I saw her, a woman I recognized immediately. Her hair was pulled back in a ponytail, jeans and a sweatshirt casual but neat, a cup of black coffee steaming in front of her. She looked up, eyes wary but determined, the kind of look you give someone when you have nothing left to hide. "Mark," she said, voice low, "I figured you'd figure it out eventually." "Who are you?" I asked, sliding into the booth. Let's say, a concerned party," she said. She paused, then added, "The wife." The word hit me like a lightning bolt. I felt the floor drop beneath me. The man Lisa was seeing, he had a wife. And now she was here, across from me, calm, collected, ready to plan. "I need proof," I said, showing her the folders on my laptop, the printed receipts, the video stills. "Everything I've collected. I need to know it's true before I do anything." She leaned forward, examining the documents, nodding occasionally. "It's all true," she said. "And you're right to be careful. She's crafty. But with what you've got, and with what I can contribute, we can make sure this doesn't just stay a secret." A flicker of hope and fury rose in me. Finally, I wasn't alone. There was someone else, someone wronged, someone who could turn this from a silent nightmare into a carefully orchestrated reckoning. We spent the next hour talking quietly, mapping schedules, noting weaknesses, sharing observations. Every new detail confirmed our suspicions. Every fact sharpened our strategy. I realized the man had been hiding in plain sight, maintaining a veneer of normalcy with both of us unaware. The layers of deception were thick, but now, with two minds aligned, the plan for exposure began to take shape. As we left the diner, she whispered, "Be ready. Once we start, there's no turning back." I nodded, heart racing, fists tight. The pieces were in place, the evidence undeniable. And yet, a small part of me trembled, not out of fear of confrontation, but from the magnitude of what we were about to unleash. Back home, I spread the folder of proofs across the kitchen counter again, this time with her, the other wife, on a video call from her apartment. We traced every hotel stay, every suspicious text, every hidden expense. Each piece was like a loaded gun, pointed directly at Lisa. I looked at Rusty, curled up near my feet, and felt the weight of the coming storm. Tomorrow, everything would change. Tomorrow, suspicion would finally become reality, and the curtain would be pulled back on years of lies. And in that moment, the most chilling and exhilarating thought hit me. The woman sitting across from me wasn't just a partner in evidence gathering. She was my co-conspirator, and together, we would orchestrate a payback so precise, so calculated, that Lisa wouldn't know what hit her. The phone buzzed again. Another message from the unknown number, the same one that had been guiding me this whole time. "Ready? Tonight, the stage is set. She won't see it coming." I froze. My stomach churned. My hands shook. Not with fear, but with anticipation. The evidence was real. The betrayal was real. And the payback? That finally would also be real. The room felt colder, quieter, as if the house itself was holding its breath. I stacked the printed photos, receipts, and statements into a neat pile, my mind racing with the first moves of a game I'd been waiting years to play. And just as I reached for the laptop to finalize our plan, a notification popped up on Lisa's phone, sitting innocently on the counter, an iMessage she hadn't realized was synced to the family account. The subject line made my chest tighten. See you tonight. Don't be late. I glanced at her briefly, pretending to adjust my chair. She didn't notice me notice. And in that instant, I knew one undeniable fact. Tonight, the truth would hit, and there would be no hiding. The diner's neon lights flickered in the early evening haze as I parked across the street, the same spot where I had first met her, the other wife, just a week ago. The sky was bruised purple, the air thick with the lingering heat of a Texas summer day. Rusty leaned out of the passenger window, ears flapping in the wind, and I felt the familiar weight in my chest. Adrenaline mixed with dread. Tonight, everything would change. I carried the folder with the compiled evidence, the prints, screenshots, hotel receipts, GPS logs, under my arm like a briefcase filled with dynamite. Every item, every timestamp, every incriminating text had been carefully curated. Nothing it could be denied, nothing it could be ignored, and I wasn't coming alone. Across town, she, the other wife, was already positioned, ready to join me when the moment arrived. The plan was precise. Dinner reservations at a quiet upscale restaurant, ostensibly for our anniversary celebration, the one Lisa had been pushing for weeks. She had no idea we had intercepted her, no clue that the carefully maintained facade was about to crumble. The valet took my keys, and I stepped into the polished marble lobby, eyes scanning every corner. The hostess smiled, unaware of the storm about to unfold, and led me to the table near the back, where Lisa was already seated. She looked radiant, or rather perfectly staged, hair curled, makeup flawless, the kind of presentation she believed would distract from the truth I held in my pocket. "Mark," she said, voice warm, almost affectionate, "you're early." I smiled faintly, sliding into the booth across from her. "Yeah," I said, tone measured, calm, controlled. "Wanted to make sure everything was perfect tonight." She laughed lightly, setting her napkin on her lap. "You always do that. Always taking care of the little things." I watched her closely as she reached for her glass of wine. The subtle movements, the way she glanced at her phone for notifications, so many tiny tells. I had learned them all, and tonight they would betray her. Half an hour into dinner, our waiter, a lanky kid named Jimmy, who had taken our orders, returned with the appetizer. That was our signal. I tapped the folder, and the other wife appeared from the side entrance of the restaurant, dressed casually yet deliberately in a dark blouse and jeans. She carried her own stack of evidence, perfectly mirrored, photos, receipts, texts. Lisa's head snapped up the moment she saw her, and I savored the flicker of recognition, confusion, guilt, panic, all in her eyes at once. "Lisa," I said evenly, leaning forward slightly, "I think it's time we had a conversation. The four of us." The restaurant seemed to shrink around her. Other diners noticed the sudden tension, glances flicking between our table and hers. She blinked rapidly. I don't know what you mean," she stammered. Her lover's wife slid into the booth across from her, eyes steady, voice low but cutting. "You do, Lisa. We've been patient." "But patience runs out." Lisa's wineglass trembled in her hand. "Wait, what are you talking about?" I placed the folder on the table, spreading it open. The prints of texts, hotel receipts, and screenshots were visible to all at the table, each timestamp highlighted in red ink. I watched her swallow hard, the color draining from her face. "You see this?" I said calmly, pointing at the chain of iMessages where she coordinated meetups with him. "All the nights you said you were with friends, the dinners, the errands, all lies. Every single one. And this," I tapped on the GPS log synced from her phone, "proves every trip downtown, every time you claim to be somewhere else. No room for excuses, no room for gaslighting. It's all here." Lisa's hand flew to her mouth. "Mark, you don't understand. It's not what it looks like." The other wife leaned forward, voice steady but sharp. "Don't even try, Lisa. I've seen the texts, the photos, the hotel invoices. And you, my husband, have been lying to both of us for months. Months." Lisa shook her head violently, eyes darting to mine, to the other wife, then to the diners nearby. A family at a corner table pretended not to notice, but their curious glances told me the moment was public. "This wasn't just between us anymore. She began, but I cut her off. "No, Lisa, you don't get to speak. You've already told us everything through your actions, and actions have consequences." I slid a set of photos across the table, her leaning into him, their hands intertwined over the center console of his car, snapshots from the security footage. Her face went pale, lips quivering. She looked like a deer caught in headlights, every attempt at composure crumbling in real time. "Mark, please," she whispered, voice trembling. "You don't understand." "Lisa," the other wife said, voice icy now, "we understand perfectly, and now everyone here does too." She nodded subtly toward a nearby server who had quietly positioned herself with her phone raised, recording the interaction. I hadn't instructed her, but the energy in the restaurant was enough to draw witnesses. The server's discreet recording would serve as undeniable proof should this escalate further. Lisa's hand shook as she reached for her wine glass. It toppled over, spilling red across the tablecloth. The sound was loud in the otherwise quiet restaurant, punctuating the moment with a cinematic flourish. She froze, eyes wide, the mess reflecting the chaos she had tried so desperately to hide. "You think this is embarrassing?" I asked, voice calm. "You think anyone could feel sorry for you after what you've done? Do you know how many nights I've sat alone, pretending everything was fine, while you were out here, planning?" Her lips moved, but no sound came out. She looked around, realizing too late that the entire dining room was aware, eyes shifting toward us, phones discreetly raised, whispers circulating. The other wife opened her own folder, sliding a printout toward Lisa. A credit card statement with transactions in the same hotel chain, exact dates of her secret rendezvous, annotated with small notes about time and location. "This isn't just about what he did," she said firmly. "This is about all of it. You've ruined lives, Lisa, both of ours. And now we're taking it public, whether you like it or not." Lisa's face turned red, then pale, then red again. She slumped back, shoulders shaking. What are you doing?" I leaned back, letting the silence hang. The restaurant seemed to echo with it, diners aware, servers pausing, the air thick with tension. It was beautiful and brutal all at once, the perfect storm of exposure. Then, the sound of a phone snapping a picture. Another, a soft murmur of whispers. Lisa's panic escalated. Her breaths came fast, shallow. "Stop! Please!" she shouted, voice cracking, but no one moved, no one intervened. The other wife and I exchanged a glance. Calm, deliberate, aligned. "Mark, you okay?" she whispered, not in concern, but to remind me we were together in this. I nodded, feeling the surge of vindication, the satisfaction of years of quiet observation culminating in this moment. Lisa finally sank forward, forehead pressed to the table, hands gripping the cloth. She couldn't stop it now. The exposure was complete, the evidence public, the humiliation total. Her own carefully crafted narrative had unraveled in front of a small crowd of strangers who would never forget it, and, more importantly, witnesses who could corroborate everything. I leaned closer, lowering my voice just for her. "Do you understand now, Lisa? Every lie, every secret, every betrayal, it all comes with consequences." Her whisper was barely audible. I didn't think. I didn't know." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The message had been delivered, clear, brutal, perfectly timed. As the restaurant slowly returned to normal, diners retreating to their meals, Lisa's phone buzzed incessantly, notifications from friends, messages from the man she'd betrayed, reminders of the life she had been leading behind closed doors. And in the background, I heard the faint click of another phone camera. Someone was recording everything. I realized then the depth of what we had done. It wasn't just exposure, it was strategic, precise, undeniable. The fallout would be spectacular, and it was already beginning. The other wife squeezed my hand under the table. "We did it," she said softly. "We made sure she couldn't deny it." I nodded, still calm on the outside but my chest pounding. The satisfaction was real, but I knew this wasn't the end. Legal battles, social fallout, personal reckoning, it was only beginning. And somewhere in the distance, I imagined the man we hadn't even confronted yet, waiting for his world to implode as well. And then my phone buzzed. Another message from the unknown number that had guided me this far. "She knows, now it's time for the final act. Are you ready?" I froze, a chill running down my spine. This wasn't just a battle of exposure anymore. It was a full-scale reckoning. Rusty whined at my feet, as if sensing the tension, and I smiled faintly, stroking his fur. The calm before the storm. Everything was set. The confrontation had succeeded, the evidence public, the humiliation perfect. But the aftermath, the real payback, the healing, the closure, that was still to come. And I knew, deep down, that part 4 would be the hardest, most cathartic chapter of all. Because sometimes the truth hurts, and sometimes the truth frees. The days after the diner confrontation felt surreal, like walking through someone else's life in a dream. News had spread faster than I ever imagined. Neighbors whispering in the cul-de-sac, colleagues giving me sideways glances, social media notifications pinging relentlessly. Lisa's betrayal was public knowledge, and the world had watched, in part, thanks to the discreet recordings, the strategically placed witnesses, and the evidence we had laid bare. I returned to the house the morning after the confrontation, Rusty padding beside me, tail wagging cautiously, as if he too could sense the shift in atmosphere. The living room felt empty. Lisa's absence was more than physical. It was a presence gone, leaving behind only traces of the life we once had. A half-finished crossword on the coffee table, a Bud Light can from last weekend, a stack of mail still unopened. Every little object was a relic of deception, a silent reminder of the trust that had been shattered. I sank into the recliner, rubbing my temples. The other wife had texted that morning. I spoke with my husband. He's devastated, but he's safe. You did what needed to be done. Now, take care of yourself. It was strange, collaborating with the woman whose husband had been part of the betrayal, yet somehow that alliance had become a source of strength rather than tension. We had shared a common purpose, and that shared experience created an unexpected bond. Not romantic, not even particularly intimate, but a solidarity that was deeply reassuring in the aftermath of chaos. The legal paperwork came first. I sat across from my attorney in her small, wood-paneled office, listening as she outlined the divorce proceedings, the custody arrangements, the division of property. Lisa had hired her own lawyer, naturally, and I braced myself for every maneuver she might attempt, every excuse, every attempt at manipulation. But the evidence we had, the photos, the receipts, the messages, the recordings, left little room for doubt. The divorce was swift, the property split fairly, and Rusty stayed with me. My attorney even joked, a small smirk playing on her lips. Sometimes the trash really does take itself out. I laughed, but there was a sharp edge to it. True enough. Days turned into weeks. Slowly, I began reclaiming the rhythm of ordinary life, the mundane routines that had once felt comforting, but now carried a new depth of gratitude. I started small. Saturday morning pancakes with Rusty sprawling underfoot, the aroma of syrup and eggs filling the kitchen, a Bud Light on the porch in the late afternoon, the sunlight painting the yard golden, a cold breeze hinting at the approaching fall. Little rituals became acts of reclamation, markers of a life no longer clouded by lies. One evening, I caught the tail end of an ESPN football game, sitting on the sofa with Rusty resting his head on my knee. The scoreboard flashed, commentators droned on, but my mind wandered back to the confrontation, the moment of exposure, the humbling and exhilarating blend of vindication and heartbreak. I realized then that the payback, brutal as it had been, was only a fraction of the journey. The real work had been rediscovering peace, finding a sense of normalcy in the aftermath of betrayal. The other wife reached out again a few weeks later. Her message was simple. Coffee, need to debrief and decompress. We met at a small cafe downtown, the kind with mismatched chairs and warm lighting, and for the first time since the confrontation, we laughed. Not at Lisa, not at the situation, but at ourselves. The shared absurdity of the human condition. The way life twists and turns, leaving you with lessons disguised as disasters. We spoke of boundaries, trust, and the resilience that had carried us through the storm. It was strange, comforting, and grounding all at once. Then came the hardest and yet most tender moments, rebuilding relationships with those affected indirectly. My parents, who had been blindsided, took time to adjust. Friends who had been caught in the fallout reached out, offering quiet solidarity rather than judgment. The other wife and I even arranged a mediated conversation with her husband, now grappling with his own anger and betrayal. It was tense, awkward, but necessary. Closure, I realized, wasn't just for me. It was for everyone who had been tangled in the web of deceit. On a bright Sunday morning, I took Rusty to the park. Children's laughter echoed around us, frisbees flew through the air, and joggers passed by, earbuds in place, oblivious to the world's undercurrents. I watched a father teaching his little boy to kick a soccer ball, the boy stumbling then beaming when he succeeded. A pang of melancholy struck me, but it was fleeting, replaced by gratitude. Life persisted, indifferent to betrayal, yet offering the chance to rise above it, to heal and move forward. At home that afternoon, I sorted through the last of Lisa's belongings that had been returned. I placed her things in a cardboard box, labeling it neatly, ready for donation. The act felt symbolic, a letting go of more than just possessions. It was a clearing of space, mental and physical, making room for the life I wanted, free of deception, free of guilt, and full of honest connection. Later that evening, I found myself in the kitchen, flipping pancakes, the batter sizzling in the pan, Rusty at my side, tail wagging expectantly. The sun was low in the sky, casting long shadows across the room. I poured a glass of orange juice, then a Bud Light for myself, and carried it all to the porch. Sitting there, watching the sky deepen, from gold to amber to indigo, I felt an unexpected stillness settle over me. For the first time in months, maybe years, I was not reacting to someone else's chaos. I was simply present. I thought of Lisa, not with bitterness, but with clarity. She had been a chapter, not the whole book. Her betrayal had been brutal, yes, but it had also illuminated something vital, my own capacity to observe, to act, to protect myself, and ultimately, to heal. I had learned patience, strategy, and the power of calculated truth. But more importantly, I had learned resilience, the kind that emerges not from vengeance alone, but from reclaiming one's life. That night, I tucked Rusty in his bed, the familiar warmth of his body pressing against mine. I set the alarm for the morning, not for confrontation, not for tension, but for the quiet rhythm of routine. Coffee, breakfast, a jog, and perhaps a call to the other wife. Simple grounding acts. Before sleep, I scribbled a note to myself, something to remember, something to carry into the new life ahead. Sometimes the trash takes itself out. It was blunt, humorous, undeniably American in its bluntness, yet beneath the humor lay truth. I had sought justice, yes, but more importantly, I had reclaimed freedom, dignity, and peace. Weeks later, life settled into a new normal. Rusty and I had our walks, our small adventures, our quiet evenings. Friends and family visits were joyful, no longer clouded by secrets. Evenings in front of the TV, pancakes on weekend mornings, spontaneous road trips, the simple pleasures took on new meaning. Occasionally, I would think of the other wife and we would check in. An occasional text, a shared laugh at the absurdities of human folly. We never became close friends, but our shared experience had left a mark, a subtle thread connecting us through the strange tapestry of betrayal, exposure, and eventual healing. And then, one crisp autumn evening, I sat on the porch with a Bud Light in hand, Rusty snoozing at my feet, and I watched the leaves fall in the quiet of the neighborhood. The air was sharp, fragrant with the coming frost, and I felt something I hadn't in a long time, complete presence, untainted by deceit, unclouded by anger. Life had moved on, and so had I. The world continued in its rhythm, children playing, cars passing, neighbors chatting over fences. The chaos of betrayal had passed, leaving in its wake a profound sense of clarity. I had survived, I had acted, I had reclaimed my life. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in deep violet and gold, I smiled to myself, quietly, knowingly. Peace over revenge, truth over deception. And sometimes, in the quiet corners of everyday life, justice doesn't need to be loud. It just needs to be true. Rusty stirred, stretching lazily. I sipped my beer, watching him settle back into his comfort. Life, I realized, was astonishingly ordinary, and that ordinariness was enough. After years of betrayal, suspicion, confrontation, and chaos, it was more than enough. Sometimes the trash takes itself out, and sometimes the simple act of living fully, honestly, and with intention is the greatest revenge of all.